I never understood that the heaviest weight a man can carry isn't made of concrete, steel, or stone. It is the silence that settles into a house when the people you love decide you no longer matter. I am 82 years old, and I spent my entire working life as a civil engineer in Novi Sad. For 40 years, I charted stress points, poured foundations, and calculated the exact load a structure could bear before it snapped. You learn to read the invisible forces acting on a bridge or a building, the subtle fractures that warn you of an impending collapse. I thought I knew how to read the signs of structural failure, but I was entirely blind to the cracks forming inside my own family. Before I tell you how I dismantled my son's scheme without raising my voice or breaking my composure, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And have you ever been erased by your own blood? My wife Yelena and I bought this plot of land when there was nothing here but weeds and the cold wind blowing off the Danube. We dug the foundation trenches by hand. I remember the blisters on my palms, the ache in my lower back, and the smell of the damp earth on the days we poured the cement. We didn't have the money to hire a crew, so every brick in these walls was laid by us. This house wasn't just a place to sleep, it was the physical record of our marriage. Every floorboard, every window frame, and every roof tile held a memory of our shared labor and our shared hope for the future. We built it to last a century, a safe haven for the son we were raising. When our son Marco was born, the house felt complete. I took extra shifts at the firm, sometimes working long into the night under the glare of drafting lamps, ensuring we could afford his education. I wanted him to have the opportunities I never had. I wanted him to work with his mind, not with a trowel and mortar. And he did. He graduated, moved into the city center, married a woman named Elena, and started a life of his own. I was proud. Jelena and I watched him succeed, believing our sacrifices had built a solid foundation for his life. The decline didn't happen overnight. It started shortly after Jelena passed away. The funeral was a blur of black coats and hollow condolences. When the guests left and the house emptied out, the silence rushed in. I expected Marco to be a presence in my life, a comfort in my grief. Instead, his visits became scarce. He and Elena would drop by for an hour on a Sunday, check their watches, and leave before the coffee even went cold. The conversations were superficial. They talked about their investments, their vacations, their busy schedules. I was just the old man in the background, a box to check off on their weekend to-do list. The only beacon in my quiet world was my granddaughter, Anna. She is 7 years old, with eyes that observe everything and a heart that hasn't learned how to hide its affections. While her parents sat in the living room complaining about the traffic, Anna would follow me into my study. She loved the smell of the old blueprints and the wooden drafting table. I would tell her stories about the bridges I helped build across the river, how the steel cables hold the weight of thousands of cars, and how every strong thing requires a good anchor. She listened. She was the only person who still saw me as a man with a history, rather than a fading ghost taking up space. Then the pattern of their behavior shifted. It wasn't a subtle change. Marco and Elena suddenly began visiting 3 times a week. The brief, hollow check-ins turned into uninvited, lingering stays. Elena started bringing bags of groceries, stocking my fridge with low-sodium meals I didn't ask for. She began reorganizing the cupboards, moving Yelena's old tea sets to the back and placing new, modern dishes in the front. At first, a naive part of me thought they had finally realized how lonely I was. I thought they were trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But an engineer knows that an abrupt change in a system usually hides a structural flaw. Their kindness felt performed, rehearsed, and hollow. The true nature of their visits revealed itself in the way they began treating me. If I tried to tell a story at the dinner table, Marco would cut me off mid-sentence to discuss his work. If I went to pour myself a glass of water, Elena would rush over, grab the pitcher from my hand, and say, "Let me do that, you're too slow." They started talking about me as if I weren't in the room. They canceled my appointment with my longtime doctor and scheduled one with a specialist they chose, citing concerns about my memory. The humiliation was a slow drip. They were systematically dismantling my autonomy, brick by brick. They wanted me to feel fragile, confused, and dependent. I swallowed my pride to keep the peace, afraid that if I pushed back, they would stop bringing Anna to see me. I let them treat me like a child, because I thought it was the price of remaining in their lives. I convinced myself that their overbearing actions were just a clumsy form of care. The truth unraveled on a Tuesday afternoon. The rain was washing against the living room windows. Elena and Marco were in the kitchen, their voices lowered to a murmur, discussing bank rates. Anna was sitting on the carpet by my feet, using her crayons to draw a picture of my house. She looked up at me, her brow furrowed in innocent confusion. "Grandpa," she said softly, "when are you going to sign the papers Daddy wants? He says we are going to get a bigger garden when you move." The room spun. The air in my lungs turned to ash. I kept my face perfectly still, forcing a gentle smile for my granddaughter. "Soon, Anna. I just have to read them first," I whispered, patting her hair. My heart hammered against my ribs. The realization hit me with the force of a collapsing wall. They weren't trying to care for me. They were preparing to discard me. Moving, papers, a bigger garden. They were planning to take the house my wife and I built and place me somewhere out of sight. I waited for them to pack up their things and drive away. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I went straight to my study. Elena had insisted on organizing my paperwork the week before, claiming my desk was a mess. I knew my own filing system. I knew where the gaps were. I searched the drawers, moving past the tax returns and the old medical bills. At the very bottom of the lowest drawer, hidden beneath a stack of outdated manuals, I found a black leather folder I didn't recognize. I opened it under the light of my desk lamp. It was a legal contract. The language was dense, but my mind was sharp enough to parse the clauses. It was a power of attorney and a deed transfer. The document outlined that due to my declining cognitive abilities and physical frailty, I was voluntarily handing over all decision-making power and the title of the property to my son. Attached to the back was a brochure for an assisted living facility on the other side of the city, a place known for its cheap rates and isolated location. My chest tightened, and my knuckles turned white against the edge of the desk. I wanted to pick up the telephone, call my son, and curse him. I wanted to tear the papers into shreds and throw them in his face. The betrayal ran so deep it felt like a physical wound. The boy I had sacrificed my youth for was actively plotting to erase my existence, to cash in on the land beneath my feet. He saw my grief as weakness and my patience as senility. If you found a document that erased your life, what would you do? Would you confront them with anger, or would you wait in the shadows? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, because the choice I made required swallowing my pride. I realized that an angry confrontation was exactly what they were prepared for. If I yelled, if I threw things, they would simply use it as evidence of my alleged mental instability. They would tell a judge I was erratic and aggressive. I had to approach this the way I approached a failing bridge. I needed to identify the load-bearing pillars of their plan and quietly remove them without bringing the structure down on my own head. I carefully placed the document back exactly where I found it, making sure the edges aligned with the manuals. The next morning, when they arrived, I began my performance. I didn't fight their condescension. I leaned into it. When Elena handed me a cup of tea, I let my hand shake slightly, spilling a few drops on the saucer. I asked Marco the same question about the weather, twice in 1 hour. I watched the smug, victorious glances they exchanged. They believed their plan was working flawlessly. They thought the old man was finally breaking down. While they were blinded by their own arrogance, I made my moves. On Thursday mornings, Marco and Elena were always at their corporate offices. I told them I was taking a nap, but instead, I walked to the end of the street and caught a taxi into the city center. I went to see Nicola. Nicola and I had known each other since university. While I built the city's infrastructure, he built a reputation as the most ruthless, meticulous estate lawyer in Novi Sad. Sitting in Nicola's office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and leather bindings, I laid out the situation. Nicola didn't offer pity, he offered strategy. We spent hours reviewing the original deed, the property laws, and the specific zoning of my land. I told them I didn't just want to stop them from taking the house. I wanted to ensure they could never touch a single brick of it, even after I was in the ground. Nicola drafted an irrevocable blind trust. I transferred the title of the property and all my savings directly into the trust, relinquishing my direct ownership on paper while naming myself the sole lifetime beneficiary. The terms were ironclad. I retained the exclusive right to live in the house until my passing. Upon my death, the estate would not go to Marco. Instead, the trust would maintain the property, and the deed would eventually transfer directly to Anna when she turned 25, bypassing her parents entirely. If Marco or Elena attempted to contest it, a penalty clause would trigger, freezing their access to any familial assets indefinitely. I signed the documents with a steady hand. The ink dried, locking the legal cage securely around my property. I walked out of Nicola's office with a quiet, steady rhythm in my chest. I returned home, slipping back into my armchair, before Marco and Elena arrived to check on me. For 3 weeks I played the fool. I let them patronize me. I let them treat me like a burden. I watched them measure the backyard, casually discussing the resale value of the plot. I sat in silence, knowing their greed was building a house on sand. The confrontation came on a Saturday evening. The weather had turned cold, and rain was lashing against the windows. Elena had cooked a heavy dinner, pouring wine and laughing too loudly at Marco's jokes. The atmosphere was thick with forced cheerfulness. It was the mood of hunters closing in on a trap. Anna was upstairs, watching a cartoon in the guest room. When the plates were cleared, Marco didn't offer to wash them. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the black leather folder. He set it on the table in front of me, right next to a silver pen. He leaned in, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, we need to take care of some administrative things. Taxes are getting complicated, and we want to make sure you're protected. I had a lawyer draw this up to streamline your assets. You just need to sign at the bottom." Elena stood behind him, her eyes fixed on the pen. "It's for the best, Milan. We just want you to rest. You won't have to worry about bills or maintenance ever again." I looked at the folder. I looked at the silver pen. I let the silence stretch out, listening to the rain hit the glass. I let them sweat. I let the seconds tick by, until the air in the room felt too heavy to breathe. Marco nudged the pen closer to my hand. "Just right there, Dad, where the sticky note is." I picked up the pen. I felt the cool metal against my skin. I hovered the tip over the signature line, watching Marco's pupils dilate with anticipation. Then I set the pen down. I pushed my chair back, sitting up straight, dropping the stooped posture I had maintained for weeks. I looked my son in the eye, stripping away the facade of the confused old man. I know what this is, Marco, I said, my voice steady and clear. I read it 3 weeks ago. I know about the power of attorney. I know about the facility across town. I know you plan to sell the land. The blood drained from Marco's face. His hand fell away from my shoulder. Elena took a step back, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. You thought I was losing my mind, I continued, resting my hands flat on the oak table. You mistook my grief for weakness. You forgot who built this house. You forgot who paid for your education. You thought you could treat me like a stray dog and take the roof over my head. Marco tried to recover, his voice shaking. Dad, you're confused. It's not like that. We just... Stop talking, I commanded. The authority in my voice cut through his lie. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope Nicola had given me. I slid it across the table until it rested on top of their fraudulent contract. I went to see Nicola. The title is no longer in my name. The estate is held in an irrevocable trust. You cannot sell it. You cannot borrow against it. You have no legal standing here. Elena grabbed the envelope, tearing it open. Her eyes scanned the legal header, and her face turned a mottled shade of red. You can't do this. We have plans. We promised the developers. Your promises are your problem, I told her, my tone devoid of anger. I didn't need to yell. The facts were doing the damage for me. The house will belong to Anna when she is of age. Until then, the trust protects it. You get nothing. Marco slammed his hands on the table. The veneer of the loving sun shattered, revealing the entitled, selfish man beneath. You selfish old fool. We put up with you. We wasted our time coming here. The noise made the floorboards creak above us. Anna appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching her stuffed animal. She looked down at the dining room, watching her father scream at me. She saw the rage, the greed, and the lack of respect. She saw them for who they truly were. Marco turned, noticing his daughter, and the fight left his body. He knew he had exposed himself. I stood up from the table. Pack your things. Do not come back to this house unless I ask you to. They left in the rain, the tires of their car spinning on the wet asphalt as they pulled away. I walked back into the living room, feeling the quiet settle around me. The house is emptier now, the days are longer, and the silence is a constant companion. I miss seeing Anna every week, though Nicola assures me that trust will provide for her future. The solitude is a heavy price to pay, but it is a price I accept. I walk through the halls of my house with my head held high. I am the master of my own domain again. I did not let them erase me. I stood my ground, and I protected the legacy of the life Yelena and I built together. Would you choose the illusion of family or the peace of the truth?